A very warm welcome in the class of Mathematics 3. Today our topic is Lagrange's theorem and its applications. Myself Rupak Bhattacharjee, Assistant Professor, Department of Mathematics, GIS College of Engineering. Our topic is actually coming under the module of algebraic structure. Already we have taken some classes on this, so from those classes we need to apply some idea here. So what are the prerequisites for that particular discussion are almost same, that we need to have a clear idea on group and its properties. We need to have some idea on subgroup and obviously its properties. Not only that, we need the connection between the subgroup and group with some specific properties which are discussed in the class of subgroup. Also, we need the properties related to some specific groups of cyclic group and some others which will be used here for some example purpose. So let us proceed for the discussion of today's topic. Now, before going into the discussion of today's Lagrange theorem, we need some idea which are termed as coset. What does it mean? It means if we take a subgroup of a group G as H, and if we have one element A is in G, then the sets AH, it is defined as A composition H, where H is in capital H and A is taken from G. Similarly, HA is also defined as small h composition A, where H is in capital H. These two are called left coset and right coset respectively. The element A is called a representative of AH and HA. Now, you please concentrate. It is not that H is taken arbitrarily. H is a subgroup of group G. Keep this information in your mind for the further discussion. Now, we have some property of this one associated with that. If the mother group what we have taken as G is commutative, then of course AH is equal to HA, because in AH the elements are of the form AH and HA the elements are of the form HA. But as G is commutative, A and H means small a and small h, both of them are elements of capital G, and G is commutative, so A and H can commute for all possible cases, and that is why we can say that AH is equal to HA and it is commutative. Now our observation is that EH, what is E? E is the identity element. So EH is H because capital H is having the elements which are also present in capital G, where E is the identity element of capital G. So E must be the identity element of capital H. So EH will be H. Whether E is applied from left hand side or right hand side doesn't bother. And that A is equal to AE obviously in AH, and A is equal to EA is in HA, because this structure falls into this category. Now, before going for the next slide, if we take G as Z plus and if we take H as 3Z plus, so H is a subgroup of G. From this figure it is clear. Now the left coset we can take as 0 plus H is equal to 3n such that n is in Z, and it is nothing but H, the same thing. Now 1 plus H is equal to 3n plus 1 such that n is in Z. 2 plus H is equal to 3n plus 2 such that n is in Z. Now these are three distinct left cosets of H. They are H, 1 plus H, 2 plus H. You can think, sir, why we are not considering 3 plus H? So if you consider 3 plus H, then it will be something like that, which is nothing but can be written as so it is nothing but H. So it is not the distinct one, even if it is not having any intersection which is less than the set. It is totally same as H. So these are the three distinct left cosets for this H what we are getting. Now two properties: H be a subgroup of a group G and AB is in G. Then AH will be equal to BH. It is also a necessary sufficient condition if B inverse A is in H. So if you see that you are taking, means actually you are trying to find out the property for which these two distinct looking cosets are actually identical. AH is equal to BH if B inverse A is in H, and vice versa. HA is equal to HB if and only if AB inverse is in H. So these are the properties what sometimes required for the verification. Now we are having one definition. This is very important. This is index. So what it tells, if we take a subgroup H of G, then the number of distinct left or right cosets written as G colon H, where H in G is called index of H in G, means just in the previous example you see that H, 1 plus H and 2 plus H are the three distinct cosets, left cosets. So here the index of that particular thing will be the number of distinct left cosets, so it will be 3. What does it mean? If these are the number of distinct left coset and if you take the union of this, you will get the set G. So what does it mean? Actually it means that in how many parts you have distributed your G by the help of H. So if it is H, it is 1 plus H, it is 2 plus H, it is 3 plus H, it is 4 plus H for some different set, not for this one, but it is distinct and ultimately their summation is giving. So if you are having this one, then H creates this 5 pieces, then G colon H will be 5. That means the index of that particular thing will be 5. Okay. Now we are coming into the main topic or the lead topic of this class, that is Lagrange's theorem. What is the statement? First and foremost is the statement. We are having one subgroup of a finite group G. Important. Finite group. Then the order of H divides the order of G. Look at this. That means if you have G with order 20, you can't have H of order 17 because 17 does not divides 20. Is that clear? But you can have this. You can have this or so on. Clear? So let us check the process. So the proof is also very interesting. The proof tells us that as we are taking G is a finite group, the number of left cosets of H in G is finite, and we are taking that these left cosets are up to A1 to AR. So we are starting from A1 and we go up to AR, obviously linked with capital H. So if they are all distinct left cosets of H in G, then the previous one we got that G is nothing but the union of AIH, union of I equal to 1 to R, union of AIH, and AIH intersection AJH is now, means the last structure what I have drawn. There are no intersection between these two, but their cumulative effort means union gives you the whole set G. So this indicates GH, if it is having R number of pieces, then the index of GH will be R. It is mentioned over here. So G can be written as the number of elements in G is equal to number of elements in A1H, number of elements in A2H, and so on. And as their cardinality are same, we can write it for this all cases. We can write or substitute by the number of elements present here, that is H, 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 and so on. And the index is R. So we get this one. What is actually our target to prove? But most importantly, the order of the mother group and the order of the subgroup. So order of the subgroup divides the order of the mother group. That is why you can write that cardinality of G is equal to the index of G and H into the cardinality of H. Okay. So now proceeding further, we can say that the order of H divides the order of G. Now, in the next part, we have another corollary that if G is a group of finite order n, then the order of any element A of G divides n, and A to the power n is equal to E. Means, if you have a finite group of order n, then all the elements present in that particular group, that element's order will also divide the order of the group. And if you have one element whose order is same as the group, that element is A to the power n is raised to this, will get you E. Because if you go for more, you will get A n plus 1, and if it is not E, then n plus 1 will never divide n. So it is not possible. So what we get, this is the proof, the basic proof of this particular structure with the help of the previously discussed theorems. Now we have some application of this one. So if we take a finite group of order n, and if we take an element in G, then order of A divides order of n. Already we have gone through this particular corollary and we get this one. Thus to find order of A, we only need to check A to the power k where k is the positive divisor of n. So we don't have any need to check all these because all of them are not going to be dividing the order of the group. Only those elements which divides the order of the group has the possibility to become the order of that particular element. Suppose Z20 is taken and we are considering the class of 6 residue class. So residue class is in Z20, it belongs to Z20. But now Z20 is 20 and 1, 2, 4, 5, 10 and 20 are the only positive divisors of 20. So we have to check only for this that the class 6 single appearance can make it 20. Answer is no. So class 6 with twice appearance it is giving class 12, which is not is class 20 means class 0 means the identity element, because we need a to the power n is equal to identity element. Similarly for 4 on 6 it is also not coming, 5 on 6 it is also not coming, 10 on 6 gives you 60, which is nothing but the identity element. So order of 6 is 10, and look at this, 10 divides 20 because it is substantiated with the previous claim. So what we get as the next corollary, that let G be a group of prime order. If so, then G is cyclic. So we have this proof over there, but most importantly we have one very important observation in the last topics, that when in the last class I have mentioned Z5 plus, I think it is very much clear that Z5 is having order 5, which is nothing but prime, and we have already established in the last class that it is also a cyclic group with various generators. One is one of them, obviously mine, 2 is one of them, 3 also, and 4, all of them except the 0 class are the generators. Okay, now proceeding further, what we get, that we are having one exercise that to prove that ABCD is in a group. Now we have to complete the following Kali table for this group. How to do this? From this table, look at this, C and C, it is B. So C square is equal to B, and D, B is B, so DB is B. Now as DB is equal to B implies D is equal to E. How? Because I have operated B inverse and D is equal to the identity element of G, and D is equal to E means that D is itself the identity element. Now since C square is equal to B, it is given, which is not equal to D. So order of C is not equal to 2. Hence order of C equal to 4, because order of C can't be equal to 3 as 3 does not divide 4. Thus G is a cyclic group generated by C. How? Because C is having the same order of the particular group. This is 4. Then G can be written as E, which is nothing but D, then C, then C square, then C cube. C square is B, so C and C cube are remaining. So C cube will be A, because C will be as it was. So the Kali table will be in this structure. This is very interesting and some different approach of the problems of group theory. Now what we are getting is that if we can spend some more time on this particular discussion, then we get that we can tackle the problems of Lagrange's theorem in group theory in such a manner that some interesting type problems are coming, and they are like this. We have a problem that if we have to prove that every proper subgroup. Why I am talking about proper subgroup? That means every group is a subgroup of itself, so we are not going to consider that one. Of a group of order 6 is cyclic. So what is the claim? The claim is we have to prove that every proper subgroup of a group of order 6 is cyclic. Means if you are taking that order of H, it is going to divide 6 according to the Lagrange's theorem, and the divisors of 6 are 1, 2, 3 and 6. Now as we are starting from proper subgroups, we are going to consider only 1, 2 and 3. We are not going to consider 6. So if 1 is the divisor we are taking, then the set will be something like that with the defined binary operation, and it will always be a group. Clear? And it is going to be a cyclic group also. Similarly, if you take order of H is equal to 2, that means if you are considering for 2 here, then H is a group of prime order because 2 is prime, so it will be a group of prime order, and we know that if it is a prime order group then it will be cyclic. Just in the last problem we have discussed this one. And finally what we are getting 3, the same logic can be applicable over here to claim that it is also going to be cyclic. So all proper subgroup of the group of order 6 is cyclic. So look at this. If you don't know the property of Lagrange's theorem, if you are unable to apply the Lagrange's theorem over here, then it is not possible for you to find it out. So these are the applications of Lagrange's theorem. So now what we are getting, we are in the last part of our class and we have used these references in the making of these classes, and there are some assignments for you. Already one problem of this type we have discussed, so please try to follow that pattern to solve this particular problem. This is your problem number 1, this is your problem number 2, and this is your problem number 3. So please go through these problems very cautiously because the problems are not big but the problems are tricky. So concentrate on the solution of the assignments. Finally, I want to conclude here. I want to thank you all because this is not at all a very easy thing to understand, but you have given your time to me. Thanks a lot. Happy listening, happy learning.